Okay, let's rock on down and have a look at Associated Board Grade 3. Once again, I've got this question paper from musictheoryhelp.co.uk, and you could do exactly the same thing as well. And in fact, I recommend that you do that before having a look at this video, so you can check what you wrote against what I'm going to write. So, question 1, the following extract begins on the first beat of the bar. Fill in the missing bar line. So hopefully this should be quite straightforward, although there's a few sort of scary looking rhythms in this extract that we're going to have to work out. First thing that's really important to note is this thing here, which is the time signature, which is 6/8. And 6/8 is telling us that the music is organised into 2 dotted crotchet beats per bar. So what does that look like? That's sort of, well, there's one dotted crotchet, and there's another dotted crotchet. And so instead of splitting these beats up into 2, which is what we would normally do, we normally split them up into 3. So we're looking for 2 groups of 3 quavers like this. And that's what we're going to have to do here. If we're going to count either in dotted crotchets, or it might be easier in this case to count in terms of quavers. And if we can count up to 6 quavers, that's the point at which we're going to put our bar line in. So let's have a go. Hopefully if we count in quavers, this will be relatively straightforward. So starting off, very easy because we've got a quaver rest, which of course lasts for 1 quaver. Then we've got this scary looking thing here, which has lots of lines on it. But what these are demi-semi-quavers, or 30-second notes. Now, we can work out that the 4 notes here, even though it looks like there's lots of notes, these actually take exactly 1 quaver to play, because a quaver can be broken up into 2 semi-quavers or 4 demi-semi-quavers, and that's what we've got here. So I'm going to put in a 1 there, and that gives us our second quaver of this bar. And then we've got another quaver here. This is just a normal quaver because we don't have the bars across, so that's easy as well. So we've now made our first dotted crotchet beat. So that's our first 3 quavers or 1 dotted crotchet beat in this bar. And we just got to find our second dotted crotchet beat. Well, this is going to be quite straightforward because we've got a crotchet here. Now this lasts for 2 quavers, so that's good. That's our first 2 quavers taken care of. And then we just got to work out this thing. Now this is a dotted semi-quaver and a demi-semi-quaver. Now this is going to add up to 1 quaver because a semi-quaver, there's normally 2 semi-quavers in a quaver, but we've just slightly made them uneven. So by putting the dot there, we've added an extra demi-semi-quaver to the semi-quaver, and then we've got another demi-semi-quaver. So you can work it out, or you could just believe me that that adds up to 1 quaver. And that is the end of our first bar, because we've managed to put in 6 quavers worth of stuff into the bar. And so there's no more room, and we need to put in our bar line. Same thing is going to happen here if we can count up to 6. This is a bit more straightforward because most of it is just quavers. So there's a quaver rest and then 2 quaver notes, 2 more quavers, and this thing again, which we decided before, added up to 1 quaver. So those are our 6 quavers, or 2 dotted crotchet beats again. So we can complete that bar and put the bar line in, and joyfully you'll notice that the rhythm in this bar is exactly the same as the rhythm in the first bar, which means that we don't have to do any counting. We can just take it as read that this will also add up to 2 dotted crotchets, and so therefore will be 1 complete bar. Good, so making some progress onto the second line. We're going to do exactly the same thing again. This crazy thing here is a demi-semi-quaver rest, so we can imagine that's a demi-semi-quaver, and then we've got 3 more of those demi-semi-quavers, which we said above. Like we said here, this will add up to 1 quaver. So we can put that in there, and then we've got 2 more quavers that make up this crotchet up here. So that's our first beat up to this point. That's the first half of the bar. And then we've got this thing here, which is a dotted quaver, so that's going to be 1.5 quavers, and then 3 semi-quavers. So all of those things added together will give us 3 more quavers. So this is another grouping that adds up to 1 bar, or 6 quavers. And we've got to do the same thing here. This is quite straightforward. 1 quaver rest, 2 quavers for the crotchet, 1 more quaver, and 2 more for the crotchets. And this is a massive clue that there's a bar line in here, because we tend to only get these at the end of a bar, although we've got one here actually, and that's where it's in the middle of a bar. But you know, when you see a tie, you could definitely be thinking, oh, there's a good chance there's going to be a bar line coming in here. And then we've got to do this thing. Now we've got to just take a few of these apart. So we've got this thing here, which is a quaver, so that's easy enough. And then we've got this thing here, which is also a quaver, easy enough. And then we've got this thing, which is 2 semi-quavers are left. So we've taken these 2 quavers out. So we've got these 2 semi-quavers, which together, so this and this, will come together, and that will also be a quaver. So this group of notes here, these 4 notes, will add up to one dotted crotchet, so that's our first half of the bar, and then we've got this thing here, which is the same number of notes, just in a different order, and so that will also add up to a dotted crotchet, so we can put in our bar line there, and hopefully we'll be left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quavers, which gives us our final bar. And that makes me confident that we've put our bar lines in the right place. Now, that might have seemed a little bit tricky, and obviously you might take a little bit more time than I needed to work it all out, but all I was doing was being really careful to count up these very small notes often, so the demi-semi-quavers and the semi-quavers, and just seeing how many of those I could fit together into quavers, and that's what I was using to count out these bars, because we were looking for 6 quavers or 2 dotted crotchet beats. Okay, time to move on to the second part, and it's one of those tell us what this stuff means kind of questions. So again, it's kind of, have you learned what you need to learn for this exam, but hopefully you know what this stuff means. We start off with one of these, which is really common, and we see them all the time in music. Looks like that, a kind of closing pair of lines getting closer together all the time, and this is of course a diminuendo. So the meaning of that in the music is get softer. So when we see those, we should hopefully reduce the volume of what we're playing. So that's fine. The next one is andantino, which is another one of these tempo markings. So it's telling us how fast or slow to play. And andantino just means a little bit slower than andante, and andante just means at a walking pace. And the way we were taught to remember that was andante went for a walk, right? So andantino is probably a slow walking tempo for this music. Okay, these lines we see a lot. These are another type of sort of articulation marks. They tell us how we want the music to be performed. And they're here, aren't they? They're there on the music. And that's telling us that these are tenuto marks. And tenuto just means we really make sure the notes are held. So hold notes for full length would be a good answer for that. Hold notes for full length. L-E-N-G-T length. Good. Okay. The next one is this cross. Now, where do we see that? Because it's always good to have a look at where they are in the music, because that might give us a bit of a clue. And it does here, because this is where we find our cross symbol, and it's exactly before a note in the music, and that gives us a clue, because it's quite similar to the way we have this sharp sitting before the note. And in fact, it is another thing like a sharp, accidental, which allows us to change the pitch of the note that it sits before. And this is a double sharp, which I think we've talked about before, where instead of raising the note by one semitone, which is what the normal sharp sign does, this double sharp helps us raise the pitch of the note by 2 semitones or a tone. So that would transform this F into a G. Okay, moving on to the next question. Part B, which ornamentation features on the last 4 quavers? And it's true, these 4 quavers here all have these kind of tiny little notes attached to them, and these are a form of ornament, which is essentially a kind of extra little twiddle that we put into the melody to make it a bit more interesting. And I don't know if I've covered ornaments yet, so that might be something for me to make a video about, but these happen a certain amount in classical music, and they just mean very simply that this little note is just kind of crushed in against the second note, so they'll be so short it doesn't even have a length. If you notice that there's no rhythmic time set aside for these little notes, they just get kind of crushed in together with the larger note. And the name for these ones, there are a few different ones, but this one is called an akiakachura, which is quite difficult to spell, so I'll have to concentrate. Akiakachura. Phew. Which is a very long way of saying they are crushed in. So yeah, it has 4 C's and 4 A's in this very long word. So it's a very long word to say just a note that's crushed in. That is one you probably just need to know. And that is the end of part 1. So I will see you for question 2.